They told everyone I was a waitress. Not in a proud way, not in the she's working hard kind of tone. It was always said with a quiet pause afterward, the kind that invited judgment. Still just a waitress, my mother would add, tilting her glass slightly as if that softened the blow. For 9 years, that was my identity in this family. Every holiday, every birthday, every dinner where relatives gathered and comparisons were silently sharpened like knives under the table. My younger sister, Alina, was the opposite. She's a corporate strategist, my father would say, his voice lifting just enough to carry across the room. There was always admiration when he said her name, a glow. And then there was me. I learned very early that correcting them wasn't worth it. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. So I let them talk. I let them believe I spent my days balancing trays and memorizing orders, smiling politely at strangers who tipped in loose coins. And in a way, that part was true. 9 years ago, I had been a waitress. I still remember the smell of coffee soaked into my uniform, the ache in my feet after double shifts, the way customers barely looked at my face when they handed me cash. That job paid for my first laptop, a second-hand one with a flickering screen and a battery that barely held a charge. I didn't tell my parents when I bought it. They wouldn't have understood why it mattered. Because what I did after those shifts, that was the real beginning. Every night after closing, I would sit at the small kitchen table in my one-room apartment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, and I would learn property law, market patterns, zoning regulations. Quietly, methodically, I built something they never saw. Not because it was hidden, but because they never looked. The first property I bought was small, forgotten, cheap for a reason. A narrow building on the edge of a declining block. My entire savings went into it. I remember signing that first document. My hands didn't shake, but something inside me settled. That was the moment I stopped being what they said I was. I didn't tell them. Instead, I showed up for Christmas that year with the same polite smile. "And how's the restaurant?" my mother asked, slicing into a perfectly glazed ham. "It's fine," I said. That became my standard answer. Always fine. Never more. Because every time I thought about explaining, I would remember the way my father used to look at me when I was younger. Like he was waiting for me to become something else. Something better. And when I didn't, that look changed. Not anger, not disappointment. Something quieter. Dismissal. So I stopped trying to earn their approval. I built my own. Property by property. Year by year. I learned how to spot value where others saw decay. I learned patience. And most importantly, I learned silence. Because silence gave me control. The second property came 18 months later. Then a third. Each one larger than the last. Each one carefully chosen. I didn't rush. I didn't gamble. I built. Slowly. Intentionally. By the 5th year, I had formed a small holding company. Not under my name. That part mattered. Because I wasn't just building wealth, I was building distance. From their expectations. From their opinions. From the version of me they had already decided was permanent. Meanwhile, nothing changed at home. If anything, the contrast grew sharper. Alina's promotions were celebrated like national holidays. Her job title evolved every year, becoming more complex, more impressive. "She just closed a major deal," my mother would say, pride woven into every word. "And you?" my father would ask, almost as an afterthought. "Still at the restaurant?" I would nod. Yes. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. Because even after I no longer needed the job, I didn't quit immediately. I stayed. Partly out of habit, partly because it reminded me of where I started, but mostly because it made everything else easier to hide. No one questions a waitress. No one imagines she owns anything. That invisibility became my advantage. By year 7, I had acquired a commercial property. That one changed everything. It wasn't just another building, it was location, potential, scale. The kind of property that shifts your trajectory if you handle it right. I remember walking through it for the first time. Dust hung in the air. The floors creaked under my steps, but I could already see what it would become. Not what it was, what it could be. That difference, that's where everything happens. I secured it through a quiet negotiation. No attention, no announcements. Just a signed deed. $4.7 million. That number didn't feel real at first. Not because it was too big, but because I had reached it without anyone noticing. Not my parents, not my sister. No one. And I preferred it that way, because the moment people see you differently, they treat you differently. And I wasn't ready for that. Not from them, especially not from them. So I kept showing up to dinners, kept listening to the same conversations, the same comparisons, the same quiet humiliations. Alina is thinking of buying property soon, my father said once. That's a smart investment. I almost smiled, but I didn't. I just took a sip of water and said nothing. Because correcting him would have changed everything. And I needed more time, more distance, more certainty. By the 9th year, everything was in place. The properties, the structure, the stability. I had stepped back from the restaurant months earlier, but no one knew, because no one asked the right questions, and I never volunteered the answers. That Christmas was no different. At least, it didn't start that way. The table was set the same. The conversations followed the same patterns, the same jokes, the same assumptions.
Still working late nights? My mother asked casually. Yes, I said. It was almost automatic now. But something shifted that evening. Not in me, in Alina. She had always accepted the narrative they built about me, never challenged it, never questioned it. But that night, something about her tone was different. More curious, less certain. "What restaurant are you at again?" she asked. It was a simple question, but it lingered, for a moment longer than it should have. I gave her the name. She nodded, but she didn't drop it. And for the first time in 9 years, I wondered if something was about to change. Alina didn't drop it. That was unusual. Normally, she would smile, nod, and move the conversation back to something safer, something that kept the balance of the room intact. But that night, she leaned back slightly in her chair, her fingers resting lightly against the stem of her glass, her eyes studying me in a way they hadn't before. Not with judgment, not even with curiosity alone,
With calculation. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. Because I had spent 9 years watching people underestimate me. You learn to read small shifts when you live like that. "You've been there a long time, haven't you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "How long?" 9 years. My father gave a quiet chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "That's dedication," he said, the word stretching just enough to carry its real meaning. My mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, at least it's stable," she added. Stable. That word again. Safe. Small. Predictable. I nodded, letting it pass like I always did. But Alina didn't move on. Instead, she reached for her phone. At first, it seemed casual, like she was checking a message. But then she typed something. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyes flicked up toward me once, then back down to the screen. Something tightened in my chest. Not fear, exactly. Awareness. Because moments like this don't happen randomly. They build.
quietly, just like everything else. "What's the name again?" she asked. I repeated it. She typed it in, then paused, and added something else. I could see it in the reflection of her glass, the faint glow of the screen catching the curve of it. 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words typed into a search bar, and everything shifted. Her expression changed first, not dramatically, just a slight narrowing of the eyes, a stillness. Then she leaned forward, scrolling, reading. The room continued around her, my parents talking, cutlery clinking softly against plates, but it started to feel distant, muted, because I knew that look. I had worn it myself years ago when I first realized what I was capable of building. "What are you doing?" my mother asked lightly. "Just checking something," Alina said. Her voice was different now, focused. She scrolled again, then stopped, completely. Her hand froze midair, her thumb hovering just above the screen. And then she looked at me.
Not the way she had before. This time there was no assumption in her eyes, no quiet superiority, only a question, a real one. "You said you work here?" she asked. "Yes." Her gaze didn't leave my face. "And this is the only place?" "Yes." Silence stretched for a second too long. My father frowned slightly. "What is this about?" he asked. Alina didn't answer him. She turned her phone around, slowly, and placed it on the table between us. "I think you should look at this," she said. My mother leaned forward first, then my father. I didn't move. I didn't need to, because I already knew what she had found. It wasn't everything, not yet, but it was enough. On the screen was a property listing, not a public advertisement, a registry entry. Official, precise. The address, the valuation, and the ownership structure. A holding company. One that didn't immediately trace back to me. But it didn't need to. Because right beneath it was the document. The deed. $4,700,000. The number sat there in clear, undeniable print. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother blinked, leaning closer as if the numbers might change if she looked at them differently. "That can't be right," she said quietly. My father's expression hardened. "What is this?" he asked, his voice sharper now. Alina didn't answer immediately. She was still looking at me, waiting. For the first time in 9 years, the room wasn't telling me who I was. It was asking. And that changed everything. I reached for my glass, taking a slow sip of water before setting it back down. "It's a property," I said. "That's obvious," my father snapped. "Why are we looking at it?" I held his gaze. "Because it's mine." The silence that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was absolute. My mother's hand slipped slightly against the table, the edge of her phone tapping softly against the wood before falling still. "That's not funny," she said, her voice thinner now. "I'm not joking." My father shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "No, that's not possible." Alina still hadn't looked away. "How?" she asked. It was the simplest question in the room, and the only one that mattered. I could have explained everything. The years, the work, the decisions. But none of that would land the way they needed it to. Because this moment wasn't about the process. It was about the truth. "I bought it," I said. My father let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "With what?" he asked. "Tips?" The word hung in the air. Sharp. Familiar. But this time it didn't land the same way. "Among other things," I said calmly. My mother shook her head again, more urgently now. "No, this has to be some kind of mistake," she said. "There's no way." "There's documentation," Alina interrupted softly. She scrolled again, her finger moving with precision now. "Multiple entries. Different properties. Same structure." She looked up. "At least 5.
she added.
That was when my father's expression changed. Not disbelief. Not yet. Something else. Something closer to realization.
You're saying, he started,
But didn't finish the sentence. I didn't help him. I didn't need to, because the truth was already sitting there, glowing faintly on the screen between us. For 9 years, they had reduced me to something small, something manageable, something easy to understand. And now, in a matter of seconds, that version of me was gone. Not replaced. Exposed. My mother leaned back slowly in her chair, her eyes still fixed on the phone. "All this time," she whispered. I didn't respond, because there was nothing to add. No explanation would change what they were seeing. No justification would make it easier to process. This wasn't something they could argue with. It was documented, signed, real. Alina locked her phone and placed it back on the table, her gaze still steady on mine.
You never said anything, she said.
No, I replied.
Why?
That question lingered longer than the others. Because it wasn't about money or property. It was about something deeper, something they hadn't considered before. I held her gaze for a moment before answering. Because you never asked. No one spoke after that. The kind of silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, shifting, trying to rearrange everything that had been said about me over the past 9 years. My father leaned back slowly, his fingers pressing against the table as if grounding himself. That doesn't explain it, he said finally. You don't just buy properties like this. I didn't respond immediately, because he wasn't asking for an explanation. He was resisting one. I didn't just buy it, I said. I built toward it. My mother's eyes lifted from the table to my face, searching now, not dismissing. Built how? She asked. There was something fragile in her voice. Not softness, uncertainty. I folded my hands loosely in front of me. After my shifts, I studied property law, market patterns, zoning regulations. I started small, one property, then another. My father let out a breath through his nose. And you never thought to mention this? I did, I said quietly. A few times. They both looked at me, surprised. I stopped when I realized it didn't matter. That landed, not loudly, but deeply, because they both knew it was true. My mother looked down again, her fingers tightening slightly around her napkin. Alina spoke next. And the company? She asked. The name on the deed isn't yours. No, I said. It's not. Why? Structure, I replied. And distance. My father frowned. Distance from what? I met his gaze. From this. That was the first moment he didn't have an immediate response. The room shifted again, not just in tone, in position. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. They were reacting to me. My mother exhaled slowly. You let us believe, she started, then stopped. I didn't finish the sentence for her, because the truth was uncomfortable in a way explanations couldn't fix. Yes, I said. Her lips pressed together. Why would you do that? She asked. I held her gaze. Because it was easier than correcting you every time. My father's jaw tightened. That's not fair, he said. I almost smiled at that. Fair. That word again. Neither was this, I replied, gesturing lightly to the table, the room, the years sitting quietly between us. That was when the defensiveness started to crack. Not completely, but enough. Alina leaned forward slightly. How many properties? She asked. I paused for a moment. 7, I said. My mother's head lifted sharply. 7, she repeated. Yes. And they're all like this? She asked, her voice careful now. Different sizes, I said. Different values. But yes. My father ran a hand over his face, slower this time. That's... He started, then stopped. He didn't finish the sentence, because he didn't have the right word for it yet. Impressive wouldn't sit comfortably. Neither would unbelievable. So he said nothing. And that silence said more than anything else. Alina's voice cut through it again. And the $4.7 million one? She asked. That's the largest? Yes. When did you buy it? 2 years ago. That detail landed differently, because it wasn't recent. This wasn't a sudden success. It had been there, existing, while they continued telling the same story about me. My mother's expression shifted again. 2 years, she repeated softly. That's before... She stopped herself. Before what? Before the last holiday where they joked about my tips? Before the dinner where my father suggested I think about something more stable? Before all the moments they had reinforced a version of me that no longer existed? Yes, I said. Before all of it. My father straightened slightly. Why keep the job then? He asked. If you already had all this. That was a fair question, and this time, I answered it fully. Because it reminded me where I started, I said, and because it made everything else invisible. He frowned. Invisible? No one looks twice at a waitress, I said. No one asks what she owns. No one assumes she has anything worth hiding. That sat with him. You could see it. The slow realization that the thing they used to define me had been the very thing that protected everything I built. Alina leaned back slightly, processing. So all those years, she said, almost to herself. You were sitting here, listening to us talk. Yes. And you never corrected us. No. Not once? Not in a way that mattered. My mother's voice was quieter now. We didn't know, she said. I looked at her. I know. That wasn't an accusation. It was a statement. And somehow, that made it heavier. Because it removed the possibility of defense. My father exhaled again, longer this time. This is... He paused, searching for something solid to hold on to. This changes things. There it was, the shift. Not fully formed yet, but present and expected. I tilted my head slightly. How? I asked. He blinked. Asking how? He repeated. Yes, I said calmly. How does it change things? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't just about money or status. It was about power, about perception, about the way they had positioned me in this family for nearly a decade. And now that position was gone, replaced by something they didn't fully understand yet. My mother spoke again, more carefully now. Well, you're clearly doing well, she said. We just didn't realize. I nodded once. That's true. And we would have supported you, she added quickly. That was the first thing she said that wasn't entirely honest. Not intentionally, but still. I didn't need support, I said. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not the point, he said. It is, I replied. For me, it is, because everything I built without them. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. And that difference mattered. Alina watched the exchange closely. You're not angry, she said suddenly. It wasn't a question, it was an observation. I turned to her. No, I said. Why not? I considered that for a moment, because the answer wasn't simple. I was, I said, at the beginning. And now? Now it doesn't change anything. That was the part they weren't expecting. The lack of emotion. The absence of confrontation. Because this wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. That had already happened. Quietly. Over years. Without them noticing. My father shifted in his seat again. So what happens now? He asked. That question carried more weight than the others. Because it wasn't just about information anymore. It was about direction. About what came next. I picked up my glass again, taking a small sip before setting it down. Nothing, I said. He frowned. Nothing? Yes. You expect us to just go back to normal? I met his gaze. That depends on what you think normal was. My father didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a version of normal that fit anymore. Not the one they had been living in. Not the one where I sat quietly at the edge of the table while they defined me in simple terms. He leaned back, slower this time, his eyes still on me but no longer certain of what he was looking at. That's not what I meant, he said finally. I know, I replied. My mother shifted in her seat, her posture more careful now, like she was stepping around something fragile. We just need time to process this, she said. I nodded. That makes sense. And it did. Because this wasn't a small correction. It was a complete reversal. 9 years of assumptions undone in a few minutes. Alina tapped her fingers lightly against the table, thinking. You said 7 properties, she said. Are they all under the same company? 2 companies, I replied. Different structures. Why split them? Risk, I said, and flexibility. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. My father glanced between us, something tightening in his expression again. You talk like this is normal, he said. For me it is. That answer didn't sit well with him, because it highlighted the distance, not just financial, intellectual, experiential, a space he hadn't realized existed until now. My mother looked at me again, softer this time. You could have told us, she said. I held her gaze. I could have, I agreed. Then why didn't you? I let a small pause settle before answering. Because I wanted to see how long it would take. Her brow furrowed. To see what? She asked. To see if you would ever ask who I actually was, I said. That landed harder than anything else I had said so far, because it wasn't about money or success. It was about attention, about interest, about whether they ever looked past the surface they were comfortable with. My father shifted again, more sharply this time. That's not fair, he said. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch just enough. Then I said quietly, It is. Because fairness isn't defined by intention. It's defined by outcome. And the outcome had been clear for years. Alina exhaled slowly, her gaze dropping to the table for a moment before returning to me. You changed, she said. Yes,
When?
a long time ago.
Why didn't I notice?
That question wasn't defensive. It was honest, and that made it different. Because you didn't have a reason to look, I said. She nodded once. That answer didn't hurt her the way it hurt my parents. It clarified something. My mother's voice came again, quieter now.
We didn't mean to.
She started, then stopped. I didn't fill in the rest. Because intent wasn't the point, and explaining it wouldn't undo anything. My father leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting again, searching for control.
So what are you planning to do with all of this? He asked. With the properties? With everything.
I considered the question. Continue, I said. Continue what? Building? He frowned.
That's it?
For now. He studied me for a moment.
And the restaurant?
He asked. I left. That detail hit differently. When? My mother asked quickly. Months ago. And you didn't tell us? No. Why not? I met her eyes. For the same reason I didn't tell you anything else. That answer didn't need explanation. Alina leaned back again, her arms crossing lightly, not defensively, just thinking. So the version of you we've known, she said slowly, hasn't existed for a while. No, I said. How long? I paused. Years. My father let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but without humor.
That's
He shook his head.
unbelievable.
I didn't argue with that, because from his perspective it was. From mine, it was just time. Time used differently.
Time spent building instead of explaining. My mother looked down at her hands again.
All those dinners, she murmured. I followed her gaze briefly. Yes. We talked about you like... She didn't finish. You did, I said. The honesty in that didn't accuse. It confirmed. And that made it harder to dismiss. Alina reached for her phone again, unlocking it, but not scrolling this time. Just holding it. There's more, isn't there? She said. Yes. How much more? I thought about that. Not in terms of numbers, but in terms of what they were ready to understand. Enough, I said. She gave a small, almost amused exhale. That's not an answer. It's the one that matters. Because the exact number wasn't the point. The shift was. The reality that they had been wrong for years. My father straightened again, something firmer returning to his posture. Well, he said, this is... good. The word sounded strange coming from him. Uncertain. We always wanted you to succeed, he added.
I looked at him. Really looked this time. At the slight tension in his jaw. The way his hands rested too firmly on the table. The careful choice of words. I know, I said. But that wasn't entirely true. Because what they wanted and what they supported hadn't always aligned. My mother nodded quickly. Of course we did, she said. We just thought that I wasn't. I finished for her. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. That honesty cost her something. You could see it. And for the first time that evening, I felt something shift slightly inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Alina leaned forward again, her voice steady. So what happens now? She asked. It was the same question my father had asked earlier, but it sounded different coming from her. Less about control, more about understanding. I picked up my glass again, tracing the rim lightly with my finger before setting it back down. That depends, I said. On what? On whether you want to know me, I replied.
The room went still again. Because this wasn't about money anymore, or properties, or success. It was about something much simpler and much harder. My mother looked at me carefully. "Of course we do," she said. I held her gaze. "Then you'll have to start asking different questions." No one rushed to speak after that, because different questions require something most people avoid: effort. And for the first time, I could see them realizing that knowing me would take more than assumptions and occasional comments across a dinner table. It would take attention. Alina was the first to adjust. "What was the first property?" she asked. The question was simple, but it was the right kind. I leaned back slightly. "A small residential building," I said. 2 units, edge of a declining block. "Why that one?" "Because no one else wanted it," I replied, "and that made it affordable." She nodded slowly. "And you saw something in it?" "Yes." "What?" "Potential," I said. "Not in what it was, but in what it could become." My father listened, his expression quieter now. Not interrupting, not correcting, just listening. That alone was new. My mother tilted her head slightly. "And it worked?" she asked. "Yes." "How long did it take?" 18 months. "To do what?" "To stabilize it," I said. "Repairs, tenants, cash flow." She absorbed that, her fingers relaxing slightly on the table. "And then you bought another?" she asked. "Yes." "With the money from the first?" "Partly." "And you just kept going?" "Yes." There was something almost disorienting in the way the conversation had shifted. For years, they had spoken about me. Now they were asking me. Alina glanced down briefly, then back up. "Were you ever worried it wouldn't work?" she asked. "Yes." "When?" "All the time," I said. That answer surprised them, because it didn't match the calm version of me they were seeing now. Fear didn't disappear. It just stopped controlling decisions. "What did you do when you felt that?" she asked. "I kept going," I said. "Carefully, but consistently." My father exhaled quietly. "That sounds exhausting." "It was," I said. "And you did all of that alone?" "Yes." That word settled heavily. Not dramatic, just factual. My mother looked down again, this time longer. "We should have known," she said softly. I didn't respond, because knowing requires looking. And they hadn't. Alina leaned back, her eyes still on me. "You said you structured everything under companies," she said. "Why not just keep it in your name?" "Control," I replied. "From who?" I met her gaze. "Everyone." That answer held more meaning than she asked for, and she understood that. She didn't press further. My father shifted again, but this time his tone was different, less defensive, more measured. "So what's the plan for that $4.7 million property?" he asked. "Redevelopment," I said. "Into what?" "Mixed use," I replied. "Commercial ground floor, residential above." He nodded slowly.
That's ambitious.
It's calculated, I said. That distinction mattered. Ambition without structure fails. Calculation builds. My mother looked up again, her expression softer than it had been all evening. "You sound so certain," she said. "I am," I replied. "Were you always like this?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I became like this." "How?" "By not relying on anyone else to define what I was capable of." That line settled quietly into the space between us. Because it wasn't just about me. It reflected something about them, too. Something they hadn't considered before. Alina's voice came again, steady. "Did you ever want to tell us?" she asked. "Yes." "When?" "Many times." "Why didn't you?" I held her gaze. "Because I realized it would change how you treated me." "And that was a bad thing?" "Yes." She frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because it wouldn't be real," I said. "It would be based on what I had, not who I was." That answer stayed with her. You could see it. The way she leaned back slightly, processing. My father's voice returned, quieter now. "We didn't treat you differently because of money," he said. I looked at him. "You treated me differently because of what you thought I didn't have," I replied. That was the truth, and it was harder to argue with, because it was specific, observable, repeated. My mother closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "We didn't realize," she said. "I know." "And if we had?" I considered that. "Then this conversation would have happened sooner." That wasn't entirely comfort, but it wasn't rejection either. It left space. Alina leaned forward again, her tone thoughtful. "So what do you want from us now?" she asked. That question mattered, because it shifted the focus again. Not on what had happened, but on what could. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit just long enough. Then I said, "Clarity." My father frowned slightly. "Clarity about what?" "About how you see me," I said. My mother's expression tightened slightly. "We're seeing you now," she said. I shook my head gently. "You're seeing what I've built," I replied. That's not the same thing. That distinction mattered more than anything else I had said so far, because it separated achievement from identity. Alina nodded slowly. "That's fair," she said. My father didn't respond right away. He looked at me differently now. Not dismissively, not defensively, but cautiously. As if he was trying to understand something he hadn't needed to before. "And what happens if we don't get it right?" he asked. I met his gaze. "Then nothing changes," I said. The simplicity of that answer made it heavier, because it removed pressure, but it also removed expectation. My mother's voice softened. "We want to get it right," she said. I nodded once. "Then take your time." Because this wasn't something that could be fixed in a single conversation. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. And patterns take time to change. Alina glanced at her phone again, then back at me. "One more question," she said. I waited. "Why didn't you ever correct us? Even once, seriously?" I thought about that. Not for the answer, but for how to say it in a way they would understand. "Because I didn't need to prove anything," I said. "I needed to build something." That was the difference, and it had guided every decision I made for the past 9 years. My father leaned back again, quieter now. "That's a very different way of thinking," he said. Yes, I replied. And where did you learn that? I held his gaze. From being underestimated. My father didn't respond to that immediately, because underestimated wasn't a word that invited a quick reply. It lingered. It forced reflection in a way he wasn't used to at this table. My mother broke the silence first, her voice more careful than before. We never meant for you to feel that way, she said. I nodded once. I know, I said. And I did know. Intent had never been the core issue. Impact was. Alina studied me for a long moment, then spoke again. So when did it stop bothering you? She asked. I considered the question. It didn't stop, I said. I just stopped reacting to it. Is there a difference? She asked. Yes, I replied. One changes how you feel. The other changes what you do. That answer seemed to land with her. She nodded slowly, as if storing it somewhere. My father shifted slightly in his chair again, but this time it wasn't discomfort alone. It was recalibration. He was trying to rebuild his understanding of me using new information, and it wasn't fitting cleanly. So all those years, he said finally, you were building this while working at a restaurant? Yes. And no one knew? No one needed to know. That seems isolating, my mother said softly. It was, I replied. She hesitated. Did you ever feel lonely? That question was different. It wasn't about money or success. It was about cost. I looked at her for a moment. Yes, I said. That honesty changed the tone slightly, because it wasn't a performance of strength. It was simply truth. Alina leaned forward a little. But you still chose it, she said. Yes. Why? I paused. Because it gave me control over my life, I said, even if it cost me comfort. My father exhaled slowly. That's a heavy trade, he said. It was my choice, I replied. Silence followed again, but it wasn't as sharp this time. It was more reflective. My mother's gaze softened further. We didn't see any of that, she said. I know. And if we had? She asked again. I looked at her. Then you would have treated me differently earlier, I said. She didn't deny it. That mattered. Alina tapped her fingers lightly against the table again, thinking. So the waitress story, she said. That was just what you let people believe? Yes. Even family? Yes. My father frowned slightly. But why keep that label inside the family? He asked. I met his eyes. Because it was easier than correcting every assumption every time it came up. And you didn't think that would matter? He asked. It mattered, I said. It just didn't matter enough to change my priorities. That distinction made him pause again. Because it implied hierarchy. Not of people, but of consequences. My mother looked down again. We made jokes, she said quietly. About your job. I know, I said. We didn't think they hurt you. I know that too. That honesty softened the moment slightly, but it didn't erase it. Alina looked between us, then spoke carefully. Do you feel like we didn't respect you? She asked. That was a direct question, and it deserved a direct answer. Yes, I said. My mother flinched slightly, almost imperceptibly. My father's jaw tightened again. But neither interrupted, because I hadn't said it with anger, just clarity. And now? Alina asked. I looked at her. Now you're trying to understand me, I said.
That's different from before. She nodded slowly. And respect? I paused. Respect has to be built on understanding, I said, not surprise. That line stayed in the air longer than the others. My father looked down briefly at the table, then back up.
So what do we do now?
He asked again. But this time, it didn't sound like control. It sounded like uncertainty. I leaned back slightly. You don't need to do anything immediately, I said.
That feels incomplete,
He replied. It is, I said. But that's where truth usually starts. My mother looked at me again, her voice quieter. Do you still see us the same way? She asked. I considered that carefully. No, I said. She blinked slightly. Then how? More clearly, I replied. That wasn't cruelty. It was distance reduced. Understanding increased. Alina studied me again, her expression thoughtful. You're not angry, she said again. I already said that, I replied. But you're also not close. I nodded once. Yes. That honesty hung between us. No decoration, no softness added to make it easier. Just reality. My father cleared his throat slightly.
So what happens next in terms of family?
He asked. That question was heavier than the others, because it wasn't about facts anymore. It was about position. I looked at him. That depends on you, I said. He frowned slightly. How? On whether you want to know me as I am now, I replied, or stay with what you thought I was. My mother looked down again, then slowly back up. We want to know you, she said. I nodded. Then start from here, I said. Alina gave a small, almost faint smile. That sounds like a reset, she said. It is, I replied. My father looked at me for a long moment.
And trust?
He asked. That word again. I didn't rush the answer. Because trust wasn't automatic. It was rebuilt through consistency. Trust will take time, I said. He nodded slowly.
I understand that.
For the first time that night, there was no resistance in his tone, only acceptance of scale. My mother exhaled softly. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't need to say everything at once, I replied. Alina leaned back slightly again, processing. So this changes everything, she said. Yes, I said. But not all at once, she added. No, I agreed. She nodded once. That makes sense. The table fell into a quieter rhythm after that. Not resolved, but shifted. And for the first time, I wasn't sitting inside a story they told about me. I was sitting inside one that was still being written. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was measured. Like everyone at the table was finally adjusting to a shared reality instead of competing versions of it. My father slowly pushed his chair back a fraction, then stopped, as if unsure whether to relax or stay alert. So, he said carefully, what happens to the family house if everything you're saying is structured the way you described? It was a practical question, but underneath it was something else. Concern about control. I looked at him for a moment. It's not part of what I own, I said. He blinked.
It's not?
No. My mother straightened slightly. Then what is? It's yours, I said simply.
That landed differently than anything else I had said that night, because it removed one assumption instantly. My father's expression tightened slightly, but not in anger this time. More like confusion mixed with recalibration.
You didn't include it?
He asked. I never needed to, I said. Alina tilted her head slightly.
You could have.
She said. Yes.
But you didn't.
No.
Why not?
She asked. I paused for a moment. Because I didn't want confusion between what I built and what you already had. That answer made my mother go quiet again. My father looked down briefly, then back up. You separated everything, he said slowly. Yes. So nothing you own overlaps with us. No. That realization seemed to settle into him in a different way now, not as loss, but as structure, as if he was beginning to understand that I had been building a parallel system of my life without interference. My mother spoke again, her voice softer. We were still your family, she said. Yes, I replied, but not part of your decisions, she added. That's correct. That honesty didn't feel sharp anymore. It just existed. Alina shifted slightly in her chair. So everything you did was completely independent, she said. Yes. And no one guided you? No. Not even advice? I thought about that. No meaningful advice, I said. That line made my father's jaw tighten slightly again, but he didn't interrupt. My mother looked down for a second, then back up. That must have been difficult, she said. It was, I agreed. But you still did it, Alina said. Yes. Why? She asked again. I met her gaze. Because I couldn't afford to wait for someone else to believe in me. That answer seemed to shift something in her expression. Not sympathy, understanding. My father leaned forward slightly again.
And the money. All of it,
he said.
What was the goal?
There it was again. The assumption that everything had to lead somewhere external. I answered calmly. The goal was stability, I said. Not attention. He frowned slightly.
But you have more than stability now.
Yes.
Then what?
I looked at him. Continuation. That confused him slightly.
Continuation of what?
Of building, I said. He exhaled slowly.
So there's no end point?
No, I replied. That seemed harder for him to process than the numbers had been earlier. Because most people think in terms of completion. I didn't. My mother's voice was quieter now. You never told us any of this, she said again, but without accusation. I know. And you were okay with that distance? She asked. I considered that carefully. No, I said. But I accepted it. Alina looked at me again. Accepted it? Or chose it? She asked. I met her gaze. Both, I said. That was the most accurate answer I could give. My father rubbed his hands together slowly, thinking.
So where does that leave us now?
He asked again, but softer this time. I looked at him. That depends on whether you want proximity or information, I said.
He frowned slightly.
I don't understand the difference.
Information is what you just learned, I said. Proximity is being part of what comes next. That distinction made the room quiet again. My mother looked between us. And what does next look like? She asked. I paused. Uncertain, I said. Alina gave a faint nod.
At least that's honest,
she said. My father looked at me for a long moment.
You've changed,
he said again. Yes, I replied.
Completely,
he added. Yes.
And you don't see yourself as the same person we raised?
That question was heavier.
I didn't rush it.
I see myself as someone who started there, I said finally, but didn't stay there. My mother's eyes softened slightly. That's not a rejection, she said quietly. No, I agreed. It's a continuation. That seemed to settle something in her. Not everything, but something. Alina leaned forward slightly again. So what now? She asked. I looked at her. Now you decide how much of me you want to understand, I said. My father exhaled slowly.
And if we get it wrong?
He asked again. I met his gaze. Then you adjust, I said. Like I did. That answer didn't sound dramatic. It sounded final in a practical way. My mother nodded slowly. We will try, she said. I know, I replied. The room quieted again, but this time it didn't feel like tension. It felt like recalibration. Not everything was resolved, but something had shifted permanently. Alina looked down at the table briefly, then back up. One last thing, she said. I waited.
Do you still work as a waitress anywhere? That question carried a slight edge of curiosity again, but this time it wasn't dismissive. It was investigative. I shook my head. No. When did you stop completely?
Months ago.
She nodded slowly. And you never needed it at all in the end.
No. My father looked at me again.
So that part was always temporary.
Yes, I said. He exhaled again, slower this time.
That's going to take time to process,
he admitted. I nodded once. That's expected. Because truth doesn't reorganize itself instantly. It takes time to settle into new definitions. My mother reached for her glass but didn't drink. Instead, she just held it, as if grounding herself. I feel like we're meeting you for the first time, she said quietly. I looked at her. You are, I said. And this time, none of them argued with it. My mother didn't respond immediately to that, because there was no simple reply to, you are. It didn't accuse, it didn't soften.
It just defined the moment. My father exhaled slowly, then looked toward the table as if it might offer him something more stable than the conversation. So what does this mean for us? He said again, but quieter now. I didn't answer right away, because the word us had multiple versions in this room. The old one, and the one that was still forming. It means, I said finally, you don't have to keep speaking about me like I'm absent or simple. That landed. Not harshly, but directly. My mother's fingers tightened slightly around her glass again. We didn't think we were doing that, she said. I know, I replied. That's why it continued. Silence returned briefly. Not tense this time, just reflective. Alina leaned back slightly, looking between all of us. You know, she said slowly, this is going to change how people see this family. My father frowned. What do you mean?
If this gets out, she said carefully,
People will stop seeing her as just a waitress and start asking why we didn't know. That shifted the room again. Not emotionally, socially. My mother looked uneasy now. We don't need this to become public discussion, she said. I met her gaze. It won't, I said. That reassured her slightly, but it also confirmed something else. That I controlled the narrative of my life far more than they had realized. My father cleared his throat. And the properties, he said, trying to steer back into structure again. They're all managed professionally? Yes. People handle everything? Yes. He nodded slowly. So you're not involved day to day? I'm involved where it matters, I said. That answer seemed to satisfy him enough for now. My mother looked at me again. You've built a life we knew nothing about, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. And you did it without asking us for anything. That's correct. She looked down for a moment, then back up. That makes me feel... She paused, searching. Left behind. I didn't interrupt, because that feeling was valid, even if it wasn't my responsibility. Alina spoke again, more gently this time. She didn't leave you behind, she said. She just didn't bring you along. That distinction made my mother blink. My father looked at Alina briefly, then back at me. So what now? He asked again, but without pressure this time. I considered the question more carefully than before. Now you decide how you want this to exist, I said. What does that mean? My mother asked. It means, I replied, you can treat what you know as something you occasionally reference, or something you understand. Alina tilted her head. And understanding requires what? She asked. Time, I said. And honesty. My father nodded slowly. That we can do, he said. I didn't respond immediately, because commitment in words is easier than consistency in behavior. My mother looked at me again, her expression softer than earlier in the night. Will you still come to family dinners? She asked. That question was simple, but it carried everything beneath it. Expectation, belonging, distance. I met her eyes. Yes, I said. Relief passed through her face, subtle but visible. On one condition, I added. My father looked up slightly. What condition? He asked. I paused. That I'm not reduced again to something small when I'm sitting at the table. Silence followed. Not resistance, acknowledgement. My mother nodded slowly. That's fair, she said. Alina added quietly, it won't happen again. I looked at her. I know, I said. Because she was already changing how she saw things. That mattered. My father leaned back slightly, as if finally allowing himself to settle. This is a lot, he admitted. Yes, I said. But it's real, he added. Yes. That word mattered more than anything else tonight. Real. Not assumption, not story. Reality. My mother exhaled slowly, then placed her glass down gently. I think we need to relearn you, she said. I nodded. That's accurate. Alina gave a small, thoughtful smile.
Feels like we've been reading the wrong version for years, she said. You were, I replied calmly. No emotion added, just truth. My father looked at me again.
And you're okay with starting over like this?
He asked. I thought about that. Not emotionally, practically. Yes, I said.
Why?
He asked. I met his gaze. Because I already built what I needed outside of this table, I said. Everything here now is just addition. That settled differently than anything else I had said. Because it removed dependency. It removed urgency. It removed fear. My mother looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we'll do better, she said again. I believed her intention, even if behavior would take time to match it. Alina stood slightly, stretching her hand to pick up her phone again, but then paused. She looked at me. You really did all of this alone, she said again, quieter this time. Yes, I replied. She nodded once. That's impressive, she said. I didn't respond to that word, because it wasn't the point. My father pushed his chair back slightly, then stopped. So, he said again, but this time with a faint, almost cautious steadiness.
We're rebuilding this understanding from now.
I looked at him. Yes, I said. My mother gave a small nod. From now, she repeated. Alina added softly, from the real version. I nodded once. And for the first time that night, no one corrected anything. No one assumed. No one reduced. Just listened. And in that quiet space between what they thought they knew and what they finally saw, something new began to exist. Not fixed, not finished, but real.